Hello, and welcome to this edition of at least this episode of this channel, the Dichotic Dilemma, which is a channel dedicated to the discussion of broad ideas, um, ultimately as reference from my book, The Dichotic Dilemma, The Fabric of Life, a tool of experiential learning that took me on a long journey through um, using my life experience and the perceptions of my life on all levels, personal, interpersonal, uh, interpersonal, um, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, um, to infer and investigate the phenomenon of human existence, such as to create some level of understanding, at the very least, for myself, for the um, necessity, if you wish, but more so understanding the more complexity of our human existence. So today I'm going to talk about something um, that is, um, in many ways, at the cornerstone of my personal philosophy and political outlook and spiritual perception. The idea and proposal that fundamentally all human beings are one. Now, the question is, how do you bring this philosophy or a philosophy of such a description into reality in the material world, um, based on the disparateness um, through which we exist as human beings on this planet, be it religion, culture, nationhood, language, geography, um, and beliefs. Um, the the assuredness of this position is something I've got from an interesting book because I like to, in my personal journey, reference as far and wide in terms of intellectual material resource to make um, a, a rather holistic and broad um, appreciation of the human condition. So it's quite an interesting book. It's perhaps, um, um, well, I will say that it's in any event, it's called The Love One, The Ra Chronicles, which um, is quite fascinating in many ways, but really gave me an assurance of this assertion that we are all one. It's a book that I struggled to engage with because my skepticism was very high, but one must learn that the truth exists in every avenue, and perhaps it is by exercising the open mind that you can pick up on the little manifestations of it everywhere you look. That's my personal philosophy. Now, the question is, how do you create a legal, political, economic, and social system, or the social structures that would accommodate such a philosophy? Um, we as human beings, I can suggest and will suggest that are in a state of constant progression from the evolutionary perspective. We can talk of the evolution of man from Australopithecus to Homo sapien. We can talk of the Stone Ages to the Iron Ages to the present day. We can talk of technological progression. We can talk of the progression of science and human knowledge, seemingly. Certainly, there seems to be at the very least, a continual, gradual progression. We've seen this manifest most dramatically in our scientific areas of endeavor and in the rapid industrialization of the human condition of existence, where the nature and state of human existence has rapidly changed in the last 100 or so years or more. And with each passing minute, technological progression seems to be expanding exponentially. We can see this with the even our mobile phones, where we have a new, smarter, faster phone, and to think that before 2000, mobile phones didn't even exist, if I'm correct. Now they are ubiquitous and an intrinsic part of human existence. The birth of the internet, space exploration, the rapid developments in the areas of quantum physics and many other such intellectual pursuits. But what is pretty clear is that despite rapid progression in other fields, the area or realm of human social existence is stagnant. That's a strong word because we are making progress, but it's not as fast, and certainly in this period seems to be taking a dramatic step backwards. I was watching the Senate hearing of Amy Coney Barrett yesterday with great intrigue, as I saw the political and infrastructural dimensions of United States politics play right in front of my eyes. And what was apparent was how magnificent the Constitution and the legal and political structure that the founding fathers of America created. It was truly inspired. And to see the Republicans and the Democrats jousting and trying to use fantastic arguments and debates to make their position was both inspiring and disappointing, as the politics and the disingenuousness of both parties in many ways was on full show. So what I saw was the incredible potential and capacity of the human condition, because all the speakers were highly compelling, highly educated, and made fantastic arguments. Yet you knew clearly that they were all hiding behind the true intentions of political motive. So as someone who has and does believe in the phenomenon of the dichotic dilemma, this was just truly interesting. But it does go without saying that we are in testing waters in terms of civil and social struggle. And I was also listening to a former defense, White House defense liaison, I suppose, who was defected from Trump to the Biden camp, say that she warned the White House on numerous occasions of the fear of white supremacist ideology being a domestic threat, a terrorism threat, which was ignored. Obviously countered with the social struggles that are happening on the street with the Black Lives Matter, etc. You could see all the political tensions at play. And of course, we are experiencing COVID, and we are going into further lockdowns, and the future of the economy and people's livelihoods is at stake. So one would suggest if we had some kind of robust political and economic framework to support our social existence, we could get by these challenges much better. Apparently, the top billionaires during this COVID crisis have augmented their wealth by at least a quarter collectively from what it was before, at a time where millions are losing their employment. I don't think billionaires are evil people or anything. It's just a reflection of the way the system works. They understand it, and that's the gift they had. People who can create wealth is that they understand the system. They have come across a way of creating wealth for themselves. They haven't committed a crime at all. I am not someone who is anti-rich people. I think that rhetoric is dangerous and regressive. It misses the wider point that those are just people who have either been lucky or managed to find a way to exploit the system. By exploit, I mean to create wealth for themselves, whether it's success through the education system or being an entrepreneur or anything to that effect. So I don't vilify or criminalize success, of course, as long as it's not money that has been accumulated through the exploitation of others. But that's a moral dimension. So I suppose the question is, as I try and think in my mind, that how can our social, economic, and political systems, or even our human consciousness, if that was progressing or could progress as fantastically and extraordinarily as technology is progressing, what sort of world can we live in or create? So that's the thinking on this particular video. And of course, as I say, this platform is to generate conversation, and the ultimate supposition being that if, as I said at the beginning, all human beings are one, how can we make this manifest in our wider social existence? I think that in this present day, a lot has to be said about the opinions that were and thinking that was generated by the empire and colonial exploits, particularly on the gradation of the value of a human being. Not to say that the colonial empires or the colonial exercise by the European empire were anything different to the sort of human strife that has characterized our existence over time. Because of course, it's not as if there wasn't any war or tribal differences or wranglings in Africa or in the indigenous populations. But certainly, coming into the 21st century, a narrative and the characterization of the other was created, particularly in Western philosophy, that is not to be seen really in any significant way anywhere else. The devaluation of a human being to the point of the beast. And of course, it creates a difficult political conversation because this ideology is ingrained in many parts of not only the psyche, because of course these are things that were taught in schools, apartheid and schools in Western countries, that the races were separate and blacks were here, Asians were there, etc. So it's quite a deep-seated philosophy, and of course, when it's nestled at the highest levels of power, then it's worrying and needs to be challenged. So I suppose ultimately, what I'm trying to say is, how do we turn around in this current time for the better the imperialist juggernaut with all of its economic and intellectual foundations that have created the world we live in today? Because of course it is the world of the creation of from the creation of industrialization and Western supremacy. That is the world we live in today. So not only as a black person, but as a human being, I'm invested and interested in how we turn this around. But for me, not in a way that vilifies the other, but in a way that we all learn. Because ultimately, my spiritual understanding now is, first of all, that our time here is finite, so you will die. That is, no matter who you are. And to some extent, COVID has reminded us of all of that, because even those in the highest offices, some of them have caught the virus, no matter who you are. But of course, as a black person, there's always that lingering dimension of your ethnicity somehow affecting you in every dimension, because of course it seems COVID has been, at least in the Western countries, killing ethnic minorities at a higher percentage. But that's something for another day, and we can move that aside in this instance. But yes, so the assumption is that as a human being, I'm invested in how we can turn this whole thing around in a way that works for everyone. So this is a intellectual, spiritual, and academic conversation that needs to be had. And in many ways, what needs to be done is disarm those committed to the insights and perceptions of the last century, and this dichotic way of seeing the world. Even yesterday, when I was listening to the hearing of Amy Coney Barrett, one of the Republican speakers was saying to the effect that with the riots and the looting that we've seen, is Western civilization at stake, something like that, quite typical and to be expected. And of course, divorcing her perceptions from the social unrest that has created the looting and the instability on the streets. So these people need to be disarmed, and because they, in many ways, stand for the system as it is, capitalism, and they prefer to see just the good, in many ways, that came out of the last centuries of economic exploitation. And in many ways, some of those structures are still in place, and they have a political commitment to it. But unless we can disarm those people, and I was listening quite a while back to an interesting account that when socialism and communism failed, there was a capitalist philosophy there ready to take the place. Now, I think the problem that's happening on the left, perhaps, is that there isn't, I'll suggest, suggestion of a good system that can come and replace this neoliberal capitalist system that we have in place today. So those who defend it, when they hear the socialists speak of socialism, all they think of is Mao and other failed socialist states. And we already know anyway how America is committed to the fight against socialism and communism. So it's almost a question to the thinkers out there, which is an ambition that I personally have and have mentioned in my later book, that we almost need to create a new economic, political, and social system that it's a bit like what they're saying about Donald Trump, how he wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, but he doesn't have a replacement. Because, of course, for all of the ills of capitalism, it also has its merits, and it does work to some extent. But of course, it can leave others in the margins and does not necessarily have a mechanism to counter waste and excess, which is probably one of the biggest dangers of capitalism. is the creation of waste and excess, and also this insatiable appetite for constant growth on a finite planet. Um, so I was listening to an interesting program on Al Jazeera, I think it was, and they were talking about how the construction industry relies on sand to make cement, and we've pretty much used up all of the sand. Yet the appetite to build continues. So this is sort of like the disconnect between capitalism and some of its effects, because it's about growth, 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 and creation, creation, creation. And you just have to keep taking, 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 and exploiting, exploiting, exploiting. So, in any event, the point being, we need to have a way we can really discuss these matters. Because as I saw from the display in the Senate, that it's nigh on impossible. It's got to a point now where people are so camped in their camps politically that the space for discourse is non-existent. So one of my future ambitions is to create a think tank where I can bring all the incredible thinkers on these matters and create somewhere where we can lead this conversation as a personal ambition. So I hope that was coherent, and the main takeaway is that for me, ultimately, I know with certainty, great certainty, ultimately, that we are spiritual beings existing an earthly existence. And this is undeniable. It all comes to an end at some point. We all die. So the point is, what is the purpose of it, and what do you make of it, and what do you do with it? So what I'm sure of is that there's an aspect where it's the purpose of human existence is for spiritual growth, certainly, but that is against the backdrop of physical existence on this planet, which is very complex. And I want to speak into this space. So, reading from the book, the next poem is about love. As I rewrite this book, I'm having dilemmas about how to restructure it. The feedback I've received about this book from those who have read it is, if anything, to try and structure it by having similarly themed poems together to give the book more cohesion and transferability. However, I believe in fluidity of expression, stream of consciousness, as a better format for observing the subconscious. As this book is an analysis of the subconscious and how it can and does motivate human behavior and thoughts, I am becoming more emboldened in maintaining this format of random thoughts, as I feel it reflects the human being and experience more poignantly. The human existential experience is not divided into separate entities. We experience and perceive all aspects of existence as they present and in their amalgamation on a day-to-day basis, all at once. Politics, love, religion, war, and everything else all at once, and perceive them as they shape us individually, per experience, into whom and what we are. Hence why I believe in expatiating on each notion, idea, or poem in the order in which it entered my consciousness. I hope the reader can appreciate this notion and find enjoyment from reading the book presented in this format. To understand the human being and experience is to understand it as it presents. Life does not occur in what we would deem an ordered way. That is why we struggle with it. Hence, bringing sense and understanding to an apparently disordered presentation, I suggest, is a way to understanding it and bringing balance to it. I certainly hope to draw on substantial conclusions with regards to this point by the end of this book. So moving on. Love, this is the poem. Love is the pure sacrifice of oneself for another. It is best described as an act because it can only be shown. When you love, you cannot help but love, and you cannot help but show it. It is the most powerful emotion, and with great power comes great responsibility, hence great risk and danger. It has the power to build and the power to destroy, hence great care is needed, thus it can only be shown. It is secular because to love you have to be able to show affection, and it is only in this ability that the real strength of love lies, in its expression. The power of love lies in its expression, in its overt expression. So that will conclude this episode, and as I speak freely, I hope that it's having resonance with whoever might decide to listen to my humble YouTube channel. Have a great day. Thank you.